Hi, we have so many people signed up for this. This is amazing. So it's just going to take a second for everybody to join. So bear with us. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome. This is great. Okay.
Hi, we have so many people signed up.
So we will go ahead and start and people can kind of trickle in. Welcome everyone. My name is Brittany Kerfoot, the Deputy Director of Events at Politics and Prose, and I'd like to welcome you all to PNP Live. I have just a couple of things to go over before we begin. So first, I have just dropped a link in the chat for where you can purchase your copy of Big Friendship straight from PNP's website. And a reminder that we're offering $5 flat rate shipping on all orders. So no matter how many books you add to your cart, it's just $5 to ship within the US. Also, you can ask any of our speakers a question by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but we have such a big audience tonight that if we run out of time and we don't get to your specific question, we apologize in advance. Also, we are so pleased to present this event in partnership with our friends at Girls Night In, a community that has grown from a weekly email newsletter to a full-fledged media brand and community that gathers readers both online and, when we're not in a pandemic, in real life. Also exciting news, they just recently launched The Lounge, which is a membership community for readers and homebodies alike, looking to join together virtually for book clubs, cookbook clubs, workouts, workshops, and more. This month, they're reading Big Friendship for their book club pick. And next month, they'll be reading Luster by Raven Leilani. To learn more, just head to the website at lounge.girlsnightin.co, and I will drop that link in the chat in just a bit in case you missed it. Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's guest. Aminatou Sow, the co-author of Big Friendship, is a writer, interviewer, and cultural commentator. She is a frequent public speaker whose talks and interviews lead to candid conversations about ambition, money, and power. Next, the other co-author, Anne Friedman, is a journalist, essayist, and media entrepreneur. She is a contributing author to The Gentlewoman, and every Friday she sends out a popular email newsletter. They are both the hosts of the massively popular podcast, Call Your Girlfriend. I'm sure you're already subscribed, but if you are not, go do that now. And finally, moderating the conversation is Samhita Mukhopadhyay, executive editor of Teen Vogue. She is also the co-editor of Nasty Woman, Feminism, Resistance, and Revolution in Trump's America, and the author of Outdated, Why Dating is Ruining Your Love Life. So please help me welcome these three amazing writers to PNP Live now. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going, friends?
Good to see you both.
This is just like a normal Zoom hang. Three of us.
I know. I am fully like exhaustion mode. So I was like sitting on the couch today, not doing more than that. Ugh.
Yeah, it was definitely a Monday.
It's always a Monday in coronavirus, let me tell you.
Every single day is a Monday.
It is so good to see you both. How are you feeling? How are things going? Anything going on? Any news lately? I don't know.
I'm great. Not going through a pandemic, not like stressed or like sweating. It's all going great.
I'm definitely not worrying about the census, the US post office, elections, any normal civic institutions. Definitely not worrying about any of that. Hanging out, relaxing.
Wait, Samhita, if you are here right now, does this mean that you're not the VP pick for the Democratic nominee?
Despite all the rumors, it's not going to be me. But it's funny you say that because towards the end of this book, when you're both talking about the work, that like Big Friendship has to be a living, breathing thing. For some reason in my head, it started to become democracy. Like I was like, just like democracy, Big Friendship. And it started like, I was like, this is so true. And it's a lesson for so many facets of life right now. So clearly I've been in the election zone. I loved this book. I mean, let's be honest. We've all moderated panels and you're like, yeah, I'll read the book. And then you like kind of skim it. Sorry to all the other panels I've done. But I like found myself, I was like enraptured by it. And part of it is that I've known you both for, I believe, over 10 years. And so many of the moments in the book I could remember. I remember South by Southwest. I remember you telling me about each other. Like, we're just like, I remember like the early love story. And so it was just.
Or we were like, I met someone.
Yeah.
Guess what?
I remember core family, like all of that. So it was just really special to have, had that opportunity to know you both and then read it. And also that like just thinking about how the vulnerability it takes to kind of be honest about when the friendship wasn't perfect and kind of opening up about that. So it's just, it was a journey. And I found myself like, I was like, oh my God, like I need to like really think about my big friendships. Like, where are they at? What's going on? And I can't really think of it's hard to be like, oh, it's a great time for this to come out, because like, it ain't a great time for anything, but there is something that hits so nicely about, a book about how we keep each other close in a moment when we are distanced and it's very hard to keep each other close in this moment. So I want to honor that. And it's, it's been like, it was a really great journey in kind of thinking about that for my own self. So let's like start with, the easy question. And I'm sure everybody on this call has read the book already, right? So, but like, what is a big friendship? Like, what's a big friendship versus a small F friendship, or an acquaintance or a romantic relationship?
That is actually like the central and big question, right? Is that friendship, and essentially the word friend, it just means so much. It's truly, it's like us, like people who've known each other for 11 years. And like, like we've been in our fair share of like Zooms and like, we know each other's lives. And then it's also like someone that you've just are friends with on Facebook, you don't really talk to, or it's, like a childhood friend that you're like, your parents are really good friends and then you've never seen that person since, but they're still your friend. And so we were really trying to get to the core of, like, if you are going to be in like a meaningful platonic relationship with someone, like what is the label that it can have? And, and there are many kinds of friendships that people can have, certainly. And, we identify that the kind of bond that we have is a bond that we think is like very much rooted in the future. It is a kind of friendship where we are active in each other's lives day to day. We would like to stay active in each other's lives day to day for a very, very, very long time. And, and like all relationships, it's like you go through your honeymoon phase and it's good. And then it's also hard. And how do you just like make a room for each other? And I think that big friendship really is distinguishing like a tier of friendship that we think is not, it's not as easily discussed as just like, that's my bestie or that's my best friend. It's not an exclusive tier. It's not, like a childhood, like fun friendship. It is like an adult active friendship.
Yeah. It almost, as you were talking, it's like a friendship that takes up space. It refuses to be invisible. It refuses to kind of fall into, the crevices that we've been given for where kind of friendship can live, which, I really appreciated that you went into kind of, and we've all known each other a long time. Like I've written extensively about how heteronormativity has ruined everything. And and I appreciated, Stephanie Kuntz, who I actually talked to a lot for Outdated, the like construction of the kind of nuclear family and the pushing out of these kind of, same-sex friendship, however you kind of want to discuss it. Can you talk a little bit about that like research process and kind of where, like, was there a time prior to that moment also where friendship was like this defining moment in a society or in a culture, versus like kind of how we see it now?
Well, I think for us, we felt like just on a day-to-day level, the ways that friendship is not placed in a central role by like the society and culture that we live in. And it's sort of a different question to say like, okay, like who can really articulate that for us? Like who can unpack what that means and how that came about? Like, why is it not common to buy property with a friend? Why is it not common to raise children with a friend? Like, why do we relegate all of these things to, historically, like a heterosexual romantic context? And so, yeah, Stephanie Coontz is also someone who we're a huge fan of. She's a historian. And she kind of explained that, we're really, for as long as there have been like marriage and like nuclear family structures, the way those structures have been perceived has affected the way people see their friendships and the way they prioritize them. And what society perceives as threatening to that family unit is often discouraged. And so, she really talked a lot about friendships between people of the same gender, the way that they were either encouraged or discouraged at various points. But you really see, like, throughout the historical time period that she's talking about, which is like a couple of solid centuries, that it is continually, a friendship is continually defined as something that is either supposed to help you get ready for the main show, which is marriage and family, or it's something that is a threat to like marriage and family. And you can read the kind of century by century, blow by blow in the book, but it really felt true to why structurally we don't value it these days.
Yeah, and I really felt the piece around kind of, we don't have formal ways to honor these relationships the way we have to honor so many other ones. I remember, and we talked about this a lot at the time, like when my first book came out, it was around the time when a lot of my friends were getting married, and I had been going above and beyond for people's bridal parties and weddings and flying around the country. And I didn't feel like people showed up for my party in the same way that I had kind of showed up. And I was like, all you did was get married. I wrote a book. Like, and I just remember feeling that, like, the Sex and the City episode of like a woman's right to choose. Like, it was like such a moment of like, wow, they're really like, and if I, and I remember I tried to have some difficult conversations, and it was really met with like, yeah, but like, it's my wedding, and it was like, oh, like, we just like don't see them as the same. And it hurt some friendships. It really did hurt some friendships, because I was like, well, I need to be honored in the way that like I am kind of navigating my life. But again, so like, to the difficult conversations that I think, you both have to be invested in to like make a big friendship successful. I mean, as I was reading it, I was just curious to know, and I'm sure you've been asked a ton of process questions of like, how do you write a book together? But I mean, how much of this did you know going into the book that you were like, oh, like, this is like a thing I do, and this is a thing you do, and how much of it came out like through the process of writing it? Like, was writing it also like a type of therapy?
Man, this is such a good question, because it's a bit of both, right? Like, in some ways, like Anne and I, because we work together and we host a podcast together, they're just topics that we've been in conversation with for a really long time, and we have talked about friendship for a really long time. So some things, some things like, oh yeah, would love to talk to Stephanie Coontz. Like, I'm like, yes, like, of course. Like, that was a really easy, like, I would write a book about cereal and I'm going to call Stephanie Coontz. You know what I mean? So like,
cereal is how it's been affected by heteronormative family structure.
Yeah, I'm like, yes. Stephanie Coontz, tell me how marriage affects sugar cereal. But you know what I mean? So there are things that I was like, I think we were genuinely like just aligned on. And I think that a lot of those things have to do with like how we talk and how we weave in like research into the interest that we have. We were just like curious on the same way. And then some of it also, like some ideas I think we knew we were going to talk about, but actually having to find stories from our own lives that like, are like, we can use to illustrate these like larger idea points that we were making. That was like definitely negotiated like in the writing, and also, with the benefit of therapy. I think that, on an ideas level, I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, we're aligned about friendship. Like, on a very practical, like, okay, tell me what you see with your own eyes and tell me what you feel with your own heart. That, that definitely, I think, like, came out through our process writing, and also just like our own process of like repairing our friendship.
Mm-hmm. And, what is the writing process though? Like, did you sit, because like when I'm writing, it's like, is the dark days. Like, no one's trying to come near me. Like, my mom's always like, ooh, like, because I'm like in a corner, like, So like,
I have a very nonsensical question about this. Like, do other artists like talk about writing the way that writers talk about writing? Like, I'm like, are painters sitting together just being like, it's the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Like, this is so dark. But writers all the time.
Yeah. I mean, when people are like, I love writing, I'm like, what? Like, I'm what? But
Anne loves writing. I found that out in the writing process.
I have to say that I agree that I'm like, like it's hard sometimes, but like the way that everything is hard, but I have never understood the particular like torture frame that writers put on the writing process, because I'm like, there are parts that I like better than others. There are days that go better than others, but like, it is overall something that I like really enjoy doing. And I have to say that this is like the writing process for this book was very, very different than a solo writing process too. There were some things in common, which is like trying to get the ideas out, trying to get them in the right order, like that makes sense. But it was really for us, like it started with conversation, and then outlining together, and then writing separately, and then knitting together the things we had written separately, and then revising. I mean, it really, the whole thing followed this kind of followed this pattern where there were moments of us working on our own, but there was always, at the end, literally at the end of the day, a collaboration, or maybe the next morning or whatever, because we work well at different times of day. So but yeah, it is a different thing, and it was torturous in some ways, and also just like so great in a way that other writing processes aren't. I mean, when we were in like an extreme deadline crunch, like we revised the first third of the book in like a feverish week at the very beginning of this year, like our very last chance, and we were both just marveling, like, how do people do this with only one brain? Like, how do they get through these periods of crunch time? So yeah.
Sorry, someone asked a rude question. Okay. But so okay, so I think in terms of like, what would you say are some of the things you learned? One of the things I would imagine coming out of something like this is like, it strengthens like your other relationships probably. I mean, even reading this, I started to become so reflective of my big friendships. What do you feel that you really learned about each other that you didn't kind of know before you did the book together?
I mean, do we have 10 hours? I think, like speaking only for myself, I think that the main thing that I learned is really how different we are. Like that was so much of the mythology of friendship, and so many relationships is about celebrating everything that you have in common all the time. You're just like, we love the same music, we love the same lipstick, we love the same, like that movie. Like you're so tied into, just like we are the same person. And that is good, and it's like powerful, and in so many ways is, I was like, that is how attraction works. Like you find the things that you have in common and you double down on them, and it feels really good. But it was very revelatory, and also very healing, I think, for me to really just examine all the places that we were different, and really think of those places also as places to be celebrated, instead of just places where it has to be a conflict or it has to be hard. It's like, okay, people just be different sometimes, and and that's totally okay, and it sounds so incredibly naive. Like even as I say it, I'm like, what are you like, I'm like, we didn't grow up in the same country, we didn't grow up speaking the same language, we're literally two different races. Like I could like enumerate all of the ways that we are different, like just on paper, not even, like without knowing us. And it's still so interesting how the story of sameness, this concept from Deborah Tannen, a linguist at Georgetown, the story of sameness is still what we cling on to. And you cling on to it so, so fiercely, and I think that like in our relationship, for two people who are so different on paper to have like clung on to story of sameness, I think it really goes to show you like how much of that really had to be undone. And so I feel very proud of that work and very good of that work, because I do think that it is having reverberations in other areas of my life where it's like, okay, like you don't actually have to be the same as everyone that you love. Like it's really nice to just be yourself and then let them be themselves. Like that is cool as fuck.
Mm-hmm. Man.
What did I actually am trying to think about if there is like a detail. There are definitely some little like, I mean, I agree with everything Aminatou just said, right? That would be my biggest takeaway. But I'm trying to think if there are little details that I did not know before. I mean, I definitely think there were some things about your upbringing that I had not known before. That were nothing like huge and narrative shaking, but just, like fun little details, in the same way that like if you ask your friend to tell you a story about like a certain time in their childhood or whatever, you will get a new part of their history. So that's definitely part of it. I also think that like just being forced to really articulate the reasons why certain things in our friendship were hard for us in different ways was really great. Like I could have told you like, oh yeah, that was a really bad period in time for both of us for different reasons or something like that. But really being able to say like, actually like this moment, this was going on, or like this, like, I don't know, just really being concrete. And it's hard for me to think of an example without telling a whole big story that this Zoom is not the appropriate venue for. But I do think that we talked a lot about how healing it would be, to go through this process with lots of other friends and say like, hey, remember that time when things were awkward between us? Can you walk me through blow by blow exactly what was going on with you? Because I would love to know. Those are things that are really emotionally risky to ask about. And unless you were writing a book together, which is a real structured space to have those conversations, it can be really hard to ask and to reopen those old wounds. So I'm very grateful for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sameness narrative, like even as I was reading it, I was thinking about how many women, like new women that I'll meet and will, or new friends that I'll meet and I'll be like, oh, well, we are not like that, or us, or, a lot of those kind of, group terminology. And it almost felt like, going from sameness to what you call stretch, these like stretch moments, it is a little bit like, I think it followed the trajectory of like coming of age a little bit too, right? Like, it's like, I think when friendship is in its youth, like we often do mirror like our teen ways of being like, oh, we just like have everything in common, we just love each other so much. And then, as you get older, you're like, no, we're like profoundly different. And like, how does that kind of fit together? Which I think is, one of the beautiful narrative arcs of the book is, going through that process of figuring it out and kind of knowing when to figure it out. And so like, how do you know when to figure it out? Because I I think like I think, okay, so like Aries moon, like Scorpio rising, Taurus, like there's like a like I'm just like, oh, the friendship's over, like, like we grew away apart, and like I feel like I'm so comfortable in that narrative, and like the other person's like, I hate her, and so like she dropped me, and so I think that like, and I remember like I've had thoughts like, this has made me so reflective, so if you don't mind. Like friendships that I was like, oh, like I probably could have put more effort in there and I didn't, and that must have felt so terrible for that person. And but for me in my narrative and story of self, it was like, well, I had outgrown where that person was, and I needed like I was like in a new space. And so like, how do you kind of make those decisions of like, when do you invest in the friendship, when is it showing that you invest in it, and when is it like, okay, like we kind of need to agree. And and you speak of this too. I wish there was a better language for friend breakups too, to be like, let's acknowledge this openly and then we can kind of move on. Anyway.
I mean, I wish we had an answer to that. Like, I'm like, like, when do you know how to deal with it? I will say, speaking for myself, I have never known how to deal with it. It has just dealt with me, like that is how that happens. And yeah, I think that you're right. Like, to tackle the last thing that you said of if we had like better language and better rituals and also just like better understanding that, if you're going to break up, you actually need to break up. I think that so much of this would go differently because because so much of the pain sometimes is in the hemming and the hawing of, do I still want to be here? Do I want, like, do I know what I'm doing? Like, you end up hurting each other a lot in that place. But if instead you were just like, hey, actually, like, I'm done with this friendship. I'm not saying that it would not be bad. Like, that would also suck. But, you would not be left with like a question mark of what's going on here. Like what's actually going on is that your friend does not want to be friends with you, which is then a different set of questions than just the, you know, the unspoken angst of why can we not use our words to say what we're feeling inside, which is truly the story of my adult life. I'm like, oh, it turns out I don't know how to verbalize any of my feelings. So, you know, I'm like, that's like a self-discovery of like the last 2 years that has been like very profound, but also very humiliating, you know, where it's like, oh, part of my brokenness is that I just don't know how to say how I feel. Like, I'm working on it. But yeah, you know, I think that the central question that we are asking in Big Friendship really is, what does your life look like if you just take that into consideration? Like, we don't offer a solution. We don't offer, you know, like a path for how it's supposed to go. Like, some friendships actually are toxic and bad for you, and you should probably not be friends with those people. Like, that is true. It's also true that like people and circumstances are capable of change. It's, you know, like so many things are true. And so I think the question really is, if instead of at the first road bump in your friendship, you run away, you actually address it head on. What does that friendship look like? If instead of giving people the slow fade out or of ghosting them or whatever, like whichever way you want to break up, what if you ask the question, you felt safe enough to say like, what's going on here? You know, like a thing that we have a really good script for in romantic relationships, not saying that everyone like does it well, but there, you know, it's like there's a place to turn to for that. Or when you talk to your other friends, like people will give you advice about this. That is truly the question that we are introducing. It's like, what does it look like if you complicate your understanding of the respect really that you should show to the time investment that you have made in someone's life? And I think that that answer is very different from person to person, and it is very different from relationship to relationship. But we are just like at a cultural moment where that is not even into consideration, right? It's not part of the set of questions that you are supposed to ask yourself. And so much of that is because it feels very risky to open yourself up in a friendship that way. Because I think that culturally, I at least have very much ingested the message of these feelings are just too much for just a friend. You know, it's like, this is like, I can feel this kind of strife with my dad. Like I can feel this kind of strife in my romantic relationships, because that's where these feelings are supposed to go towards. But what does it mean if you feel this intensely about your friendships, and how do you honor that, you know, whether in good times and in bad times? And you know, and I think that so much of the work that we are trying to do in the book really is not to propose solutions, but to open up for a conversation about how do we do this as a society? Because clearly people are hurting, people are sad, people are at a loss of words. And by people, I mean like myself, you know? And it would be so much easier if the next time that something weird happened with a friend or something awful, or you had these doubts, you had resources that you could turn to. Mm-hmm. And you had places that you could go and say, okay, this is a recognizable kind of pattern in other people's lives, and here are solutions that they have for how to deal with that.
Mm. I also just want to add that like this stretching metaphor makes sense in acknowledging that like you are two different people, and like, you know, accounting for the space between you is something that has to happen continually if a friendship is going to survive. And I just keep thinking about that part of your question, Samhita, about like a friendship that you've outgrown, or something that feels like an old version of you was in the friendship, like not this version of you. And one thing that feels so important is clarifying that it's not like that person, it's the friendship, right? Like I think in my youth it was, I mean, because we know we are out of that at this point. Like in my youth it was a lot more like this person is like a bad person in my life. Maybe not a bad person overall, but like this is, you know, not someone I want to walk with into the future. And now I think I'm much more of the mindset like, oh, this friendship dynamic is not working for where I am right now and where I'm going, which is a way of acknowledging like this person could have a totally different dynamic with someone who is not me, without my personal baggage and also upsides, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, and you talk about this in the book also, is like these relationships have the potential to hurt us very deeply, and like one step in overcoming pain is to acknowledge that, right? Is to you know, and I, you know, I started to think about like all the little heartbreaks, like all the heartbreaks I had on top of the big heartbreaks and the friend heartbreaks. I mean, it really is like, it feels like a heartbreak when a really good friendship falls apart. Okay, we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So I guess one of the through lines that, and you know, Aminatou, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, is, you know, and you don't necessarily spell it out explicitly, but what it feels like to me is like there's this tremendous radical potential for big friendships, and there's almost like a systematic, you know, there's a systemic denial of these relationships. What do you kind of do you see that, like, what do you see as the potential for big friendships?
We love a systemic analysis. Thank you.
I was gonna say, I'm like, I love a radical potential of anything. Like, are you kidding me? Friendship, the relationship, you know. I mean, Samhita, you know us, and I know that you are also part of this project. It's, you know, every day you wake up and you're like, how am I going to subvert capitalism and patriarchy? And the truth is that of all of the relationships that are codified right now, you know, like legally, don't get to do that. Like, they are in so many ways like complicit in that system. And friendship is one relationship that lives outside of capitalism and lives outside of patriarchy that can topple the whole thing. And it's why it is so deeply important to talk about this, right? Like, Anne started off this conversation, you know, with saying like, what does your life look like if you can buy a house with your friend, if you can raise a kid with your friend, if you can decide actually like, no, we don't want to do any of that, but we would like to build a life together, you know? Then people are asking like different sets of questions of themselves, and you are having like very radical outcomes in your life. You know, like everything does not have to be tied into your marital status or to your family status in a way. And that is, you know, I'm like, that's the world that I want to dream in. Like, that's the world that I want to live in. Like, not this, you know, a place where it's like, okay, like, I need, you know, like to be an adult, I need these three things. And then in order to be taken seriously by society, I also need like these very specific markers. Like, that feels really reductive. And the thing that's exciting though, is that even though like friendship is not a relationship that is sanctioned by the state or like taken as seriously as it should be by society, people are already doing that. You know, people like throughout history, like people have had like really powerful and beautiful platonic arrangements. And, you know, I think that what we are asking for is for those to be taken a little more seriously than they are right now.
And, you know, and to this more systemic point, it's like we're at a moment where people love to sing the praises of friendship in these kind of high level like ways, to the point where I think most adults, if they were to say like, actually, I don't have any friendships that feel meaningful to me, that would be a source of shame for a lot of people. You know, it's been this idea that we're supposed to have friendships, just have them, is very normalized. And yet, like on this level of how are we really showing people that they are allowed to prioritize friendship as one of life's core relationships, that is totally missing. And I feel like that is a real capitalist trick as well. Like, let's venerate it as this idea that's safe and over here, but like actually when it comes to dealing with the way that you could organize your life, no, we're not gonna let you do that.
Right. If you love friendship so much, name its top 5 albums, please. Like, what's the preferential tax rate here? What's the, you know, like, truly. Go.
Truly.
It's true.
All right, let's go to the Q&A. So Mia is asking, my good friend and I have been planning to do a podcast for years and we're finally kicking it off. What's your golden rule for maintaining a friendship and starting a business venture, creative brainchild together?
I mean, the golden rule is to know that business is business and friendship is friendship. Like, they are very fun when they intersect, but they are two very different things. And also, you should probably not start a business together to like deepen your friendship, and you should not, you know, like try to like, the business should not be the baby that you have to like save your relationship, and like vice versa is also true. But you know, I'm like, we did it and it's working out okay.
But also we share value. Like, I do think that like having a shared value system is really important in the sense that like, you know, we may disagree about the best choice to make like this hour or this week about something, but like in the grand scheme, like what is motivating those choices are things that we are very aligned on. And I think that I have gotten into trouble in business entanglements in my life where I don't have the shared values underpinning things, you know? And yeah, and so I don't know that there's like a quiz you can take for that, but I do think that that more than anything else is a sign of whether you can do it.
Yeah. Entanglements, yes.
You and I
right.
have been in a semi-business entanglement together, Samhita. I have worked with everyone on this Zoom.
Okay, let's see. So I tend to be pretty shy about my deep love of friendship for lots of societal reasons. When you guys entered this life-giving friendship, did you find yourself downplaying the importance of your relationship at all?
Of our friendship, I like, speaking only for myself, I will say no. Like I brought like rom-com energy to this friendship, like in like a serious way, you know. And for me, that was like really structural. It's like I wasn't really friends with anyone in like I didn't have good girlfriends in high school. Not because I didn't like the girls in high school, mostly because my high school was mostly boys. Like that was one problem. And then and college is when the like, okay, like I have good ladies in my life. And so to have this kind of friendship as like a 20-something-year-old, the frame for me really was like, wow, how many rooftops can I shout about this on? Because it, you know, I want this kind of relationship for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, my headphone's falling out because I'm so excited. I'm so excited to tell you that I never once felt weird about cheering about our friendship, or you know, like back when I used to have like staff job coworkers, like they all knew that Aminatou was like my person, you know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like something I had to downplay. But I don't know, maybe we are maybe that's a feeling more people have and we're just weird about this. It's very possible.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't remember. Yeah, I remember you two being primary. Primary.
Wow, the truth finally comes out.
Wow. Do we need to do a three-way therapy session about this?
No, I just like I was at the South by Southwest anecdote. I just remembered South by Southwest, and like I remember we were like all like tornadoes that whole time. But I actually remember that was the first time when I was like, oh, their friendship has like a it was like a vortex. Like I was like, there's a gravitational pull there that was like very exciting and awesome. But I remembered that reading the book. Okay, so how do you handle when a friend becomes distant and is unwilling to share why? And how do you handle when a friend is consistently not a good supportive friend, but you both have mutual close friends so you don't end the friendship, which you do talk about in the book?
Wow, it's like I am the one asking this question because truly I'm like, someone tell me. This is going to be like very boring, but I thank you to like thousands of dollars of therapy. How do you handle a friend that's distant? I don't think that you can handle it, but you can certainly ask them, you know, you can certainly say that you feel that they're distant. Are they being distant on purpose, or is it something that you are perceiving? That is something that you can just like put out there, because I have found, you know, that a lot of like friendship strife and conflict that I have is a conversation that I'm always just having with myself. I'm never actually having it with my friend. Like I'm just assuming about the things that my friend is doing, and I'm talking about it to myself constantly. And, you know, and sometimes when you ask them, the answer is like, yes, absolutely, I am being distant because XYZ. And other times they're like, no, what are you talking about? But either way, those two things give you more information to go on. So I will say that to the first question.
And now I like, oh yeah. And the second question was about like extended group dynamics. And this is one area where we were really excited to talk to some experts and be like, what do they have to say about adult social groups? Because a lot of the research is like, here's how kids in the lunchroom handle it, and not actually applicable to the messy emotional lives of full-grown adults. And we found that no one is looking at this question, in fact. And so the kind of loneliness, I guess is the right word, that we felt when things were bad in our friendship, because we did not want to gossip about the other person, or we did not want to make mutual friends choose a side or have it color their feeling about, the other person. That stuff is really hard and fully understudied. And I don't, there's a reason why we just describe the difficulty of it in the book and don't say like, and here's what you should do. I mean, the minimum level of just kind of saying like, talk about it doesn't really work in this situation if you are feeling like talking about it is calling out someone else's business in front of a friend. It can be very, very difficult. So good thing we didn't write an advice book, huh?
So wait, okay. So broadly speaking, what do you think can be done to redistribute excessive cultural value from romantic relationships to friendships?
Oh my God, defund everything else except for friendship.
Really?
I think the first thing that can be done is that, for those of us who are in these life-affirming friendships, that we should feel very comfortable to talk about them. Like that question earlier, where we both said that it was never weird for us to talk about it. I think that is really important. It's just like normalize having these kinds of conversations and having these kinds of friends. It's harder for your social circle to dismiss your friendship when, like it's something that you are very vocal about how important it is for you. And so that is the first thing that comes to mind for me. I also think that, in the book we write about, how rituals and assurances and communication really is key to like sustaining long-term friendship. And I have been thinking about ritual a lot lately, especially in the pandemic, because, like it's hard to leave the house. But I'm like, what are all of the ways that you commemorate someone that is like a relationship that's meaningful? There's a reason that like families have like family reunions and like bad photo albums and all those things. Like people will complain forever and ever and ever, but guess what? That's how people make memories. And then all they talk about are the memories that they've made. Like it is a genius frame for saying that you are intrinsically tied to someone. And so I think that like, finding ways to do that. A thing that I love in our friend circle, like the three of us, Samhita, I hear you about your book party and how that was not like, that like, I hear you about the feelings that you have, but I think that there are so many things like that we can do for each other. It's like, celebrate your friends like promotions, like celebrate them paying off their student loans, celebrate them buying their homes when they buy them a loan. Like the only parties that we go to don't have to be baby showers and weddings. I love going to baby showers and weddings. Well, I love going to weddings, baby showers, TBD. But you know what I mean? I was like, these things are all great. Like they're great and they're beautiful. But we should make room for celebrate all kinds of achievements that people have. I think that particularly for people who are not men, it is like very, very, very important. And not feeling that, the only day that someone is ever going to be proud of you is the day that you have like a family accomplishment, I think is also like it's intensely important in this conversation about friendship, because this is, it's how you make it normal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and also normalized by asking your friends about their friendships, right? Like, I think it's very normalized to say like, how's your significant other doing? Like, what if you just instead were like, oh, how is insert name of close friend that because like your good friends mutuals. Just ask about a friend instead of like making your first question about a romantic relationship. Like I think things like that we do in our interpersonal interactions matter as much as these big things about, buying property or naming a medical proxy or whatever.
Yeah, Anne and I in the book write about like how we used to go to weddings together. Like we were the Sow Friedmans and we would give a gift together. And at the time we were doing it and it was really fun. But part of why we were doing it too is that like anyone in their 20s and 30s who's going to weddings knows that is expensive.
Expensive.
Also, that thing of like getting a +1 to a wedding where people really expect you to bring like a significant other is so sexist and played out. And it's like, well, actually, here's the person in my life who I would like to be at this wedding with. Like, this is who I want to dance with. And doing that. So I think that really just challenging these models, these like very outdated models for how you're supposed to be an adult in the world is that is something that we can all do and model for each other.
Yeah, that just reminded me of when, so Dodai, who I know we're also all friends with, I remember she went, when I got the job at Teen Vogue, or I was interviewing for the job, I remember she went with me to buy my first Gucci bag. Aminatou, you remember this?
Oh, Godai also took me to the Gucci store. Don't worry, that is her superpower.
You know who took me to the Gucci store? Aminatou Sow. It is a real like circle of life. Obviously, nothing was purchased, but I did darken the door because of you. So.
No, but Samhita, I remember that, you know, and like talking about like getting a, you know, like a big girl purse and all of that stuff. And I was like, that is a kind of ritual that is like, you know, that like I still think about that. And I think that that is so touching that you and Dodai share that.
Yeah, no, and I remember because we went and I looked at it and we were both like, and then I was like, should I buy it right now? And she's like, no, let's walk around first, okay? And she made me like walk around the store and like let it sink in, and then, you know, and then we like came back and we bought it. And afterwards, I just started reflecting on how that was a huge moment for me. I had never spent so much money on something ever, and it was this job, and that like, you know, that was one of those quiet ways where you can kind of support your friends and support them through something that's really momentous, in a way that helps them feel seen.
Yeah, you know, and to be fair, like I know that we've just like made this example about something that's like very extravagant and like expensive, right? It's and that is like all well and good if you can afford it. But when I hear you tell that story, like sure, like it is, you know, I'm like the Gucci bag is like funny, but it is that like reassurance of like someone who is your friend, like saying like, hi, you just got this really big job and let's celebrate, you know, like I think that memory, you can create that memory in so many important ways. And I can think of so many times where like you or Anne have like taken me out for a drink, or like, you know, like taken me out to dinner and we've celebrated in these like kind of quieter ways, or like have, you know, like made me a thing. And again, it's not about, you know, you don't have to spend a lot of money to like create a ritual and assurance with each other. But I do think that like that thing, like telling your friend like, hi, you have a milestone and I'm proud of you, that is something that is like very deeply transformative for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so there's so many questions. I'm so sorry we're not going to get to all of these because we have 12 minutes, but this is a good one. So I'm always trying to remind myself when having issues with friends that they can't always be the toxic one. It could be me. How do you best identify when you're the one who needs to better themselves?
Wow, Scorpio question, love it.
I do think that there's something embedded in this question that is like one person's in the wrong and one person's in the right. And I know we've kind of talked obliquely a lot about the ways that our friendship broke down, but I do think that one reason it has been hard to discuss in interviews is that it wasn't a situation of like one of us needed to better ourselves and the other one like, you know, was just waiting for them to come around. Like part of what was going on is this series of miscommunications and ways that our lives were changing and we were not communicating well about it to each other. And so when I hear a question like that, I really think like, it's not productive to say like which one of us is toxic. I think it's more productive to kind of say, how are we missing each other right now? Or like, am I not really doing my best to ask my friend what's happening with them in a more direct way? And that just feels so much more real to me in terms of the way that at least the friendships in my life have struggled. It's very rarely been like one, like a person does something wrong and the other person has to figure out how to react. It's just like, would be great if it were that clear cut, and it just hasn't been for me. So
yeah, you know, there's also something in this question about like trying to identify a pattern, you know, of just like, okay, like if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 friendships have broken up this way, then if they're not the problem, am I the problem? And I think that the truth is that most of your friendships will break down all of the exact same way. Like there is the pattern to friendship breaking up is that people don't want to be in the friendship, you know, or that you are miscommunicating and you're missing each other. And so I just like really want to echo what you said, Anne, because I think that reframing it from the person and really thinking about, you know, the friendship itself and saying like, is like, where is the breakdown here, you know, and like, where is like, how are ways that we can address that, and being really specific about the friendship and not assigning blame to a person.
So I'm a woman of color through the trapdoor of racism and into the sunken place in a big friendship. Were there specific kinds of questions or conversations that you felt were useful to repair the relationship?
I don't know that we have a question list or anything like that. I do think that being able to acknowledge the effect that race and racism have had within our friendship has been important. And so that being something that does not happen in one checklist of questions or in one conversation, but something that is more baked into the lived experience of the friendship is one thing that occurs to me when I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I agree with that a lot. I also think that a thing that was really useful for me, you know, like back to that thing of like, oh yeah, if you're having a conversation in your head, you are only having it in your head. And so really being able to say in, you know, both in times of hurt and in times when you are not hurt, like, hi, this is particularly painful for me because of my experience as, you know, like as a Black woman, where I, you know, I have such a deep desire to not have to over explain myself to white people, because I think that, you know, there is a way that like ignorance is actually violence. And, you know, everyone just like doesn't know. They just never know. And you're always like, let me tell you my pain all the time. And that is deeply upsetting. But I think that within the bounds of an intimate relationship, your partner cannot know, you know, like cannot know where you're at unless you tell them. And I think that being able to verbalize that and being able to, you know, to also see that like, oh yeah, even if everything is going hunky-dory, you know, in a relationship between a white person and a Black person, you know, race is always happening. And so sometimes like some of the conflict is actually about that, you know, it is truly like, oh yeah, we are reacting different ways because society has afforded us different opportunities for how we can react. That was something that like, even though I knew it here, being able to say it and being able to talk to that, like that was really, that was like a galaxy brain moment for me, because I just like didn't understand what was, you know, I just like didn't understand that that was not something that we were not really addressing head on.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the process of finding a therapist together? I know you talk in the book about going to therapy, but yeah, can you share a little bit about that process?
America makes this very expensive and very difficult. So if this question is coming from someone in the United States of America, I'm just like, I'm sorry. And also we were there. It's not great. We asked some friends for recommendations of couples therapists. We had some criteria that involved, you know, a general feminist sensibility, someone who was a person of color or who had a significant experience with clients who were people of color. And beyond that, like we really didn't know what was going to happen, because obviously you can't Google friend therapist. There are a couple of therapists we quote in the book who we managed to find later, but in real time, that was not something we were aware of. And we had a therapist who we saw for a little while, and a key moment in our friendship healing was leaving his office and making eye contact, just being like, this is not working for us, and realizing that we were fully on the same page about this therapist just not getting us and what we needed, and then going and doing it all over again to find a new therapist was a drawn out and expensive and time-consuming process. For all the reasons we've just talked about, because we were trying to fix a relationship that fits outside all of these scripts for relationships that you're supposed to fix.
Absolutely. So, okay, this is the last question that we have time for, but I think a great way to end this fantastic time, like I want to keep going, but we all have other places to other things to do, not places to go. So now that friendships are long distance and must stay long distance for the foreseeable future, what are some tips you have to continue to create memories that may feel hard to create when you're not face to face with your bestie? I'm feeling zoomed and FaceTimed out, but I don't want to stop nurturing and strengthening my friendships just because travel is off the table.
Yeah. Big Zoom really is the biggest scam in the world. I was like, how do you think people kept in touch before Zoom? Like, we have other ways to do this. This moment does not have to be like a video moment all the time. And I do feel that same like pressure. I also just don't like applying the technology of work to friendship. I think that it's the way that you just like stay chained to your desk all day and then all you're doing is working. But I do think that, you know, the part in answering this question is every friendship looks different. And so if you raise the question to your friend of, hi, I am struggling to, you know, like to just stay sane in this moment. You are really important to me. I would like to stay in your life. I don't like Zoom. How do we do that together? I think that like two people can solve that problem like pretty easily. And the thing that is the hardest is actually that vulnerability of telling your friend like, hi, you're really important to me and I want to keep you in my life forever. Everything else is just logistics, you know? And so I'm like, we can do logistics. Feelings is a little bit harder, but I think that every friendship is going to have to find their own rhythm.
Yeah. And any other final?
No, I mean, I do think, and I also think that it doesn't have to be the same for every friendship, you know? I mean, every friendship is different. And so the fact that, you know, the spontaneous phone call works for one friendship, where voice memos with like days of lag time between them work for another friendship is totally reasonable. And just allowing you and your friend to kind of say, oh, I think this is what would work for us is more important than like, what is the thing, you know, or what is the technology.
Yeah. You're also the master of sending really great gifts, like personal gifts that always make me feel special. It's awesome. Okay, we're gonna bring Tyler back for the final question.
What's the reality TV show where they do that? They're like, we're gonna bring someone back for the final.
I love that. We can pretend this is a reality show. Hi, everyone. I have one more question, and also hi, everyone watching. It's very easy to feel like it's just 5 of us right here, but hi to everyone watching. I'm Tyler, the director of content at Girls Night In. And this month we have been reading Big Friendship, enjoying Big Friendship, having great discussions due to this wonderful gift of a book. So my final question for you is, what is the most book clubbable book you've read lately? What do you just want to dive into with friends?
A recent book that we were both recommended by different people in our lives was Mia Birdsong's How We Show Up, which is a nonfiction book that it feels very much like a sibling to Big Friendship in a lot of ways, that asks questions about why we do or don't feel supported and satisfied within the communities that we create. And so we definitely have talked about it together, but also the fact that the recommendation came from friends, we each got it from separate friends, I think is really telling. I don't know. What else about Mia's book? I mean,
I think that it is also, it is so centered around the question of just like, how do you want to organize your community and how do you want to organize society, you know, which is to that question that Samhita asked earlier about like, you know, what's the radical potential of friendship? I'm like, Mia Birdsong wrote about the radical potential of friendship. And it is just like really very practical, you know, like I think Anne is correct that our books are in conversation with each other. And it was so lovely for that to be like the first big book that I read after our book was out. And like, okay, like other people are thinking about this and have like actually really practical, beautiful and like thoughtful things that you can do because, you know, I'm like, my brain is not there. And I just, you know, I hope that this is a conversation that we have for a very, very long time.
Yeah, like if our book is looking at friendship kind of within it, her book is like, how does friendship fit within this bigger structure of the world? And it's like, it is also very well written and like beautifully like narrative, and you meet lots of people who are doing community in different ways. And I found that extremely thought provoking. Like it's a book that I keep texting friends about.
Thank you. I saw that Brittany just dropped it in the chat as well, so I'm going to check it out.
Great. Thank you both so much, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Samhita,
Friendship.
you're the best.
Everyone go buy Big Friendship, even though the publisher ran out of stock because it's so popular, but we are getting it back in stock this week, I promise. So go buy it. I've also dropped the link for Samhita's book, the Birdsong book, Girls Night In. Thank you guys so much for doing this. This was really lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.